Your search ends here. I have created the best vegan Portuguese custard tart or pastel de nata you can make at home. Not too thick, not too runny, the right flavor, the shape, and the flaky pastry. Hello, I'm Catherine, and I have been working toward this day for nearly 3 years. Not full time, but still. If you've been following us for a while, you know that around 2 years ago, we made a video where we tested 2 versions of vegan Portuguese custard tarts from 2 other creators, and we took them to my Portuguese grandparents, or my avós, for a taste test. We had a lot of fun with that video, and at that time I told you that I didn't have a recipe for natas of my own because I hadn't perfected it yet. And well, test after test later, I finally have a recipe for you that I, as a Portuguese Canadian, can be proud of. And along with this recipe, I am releasing an ebook with 25 vegan Portuguese recipes, and the recipe for these natas is in the ebook. So click the link down below to get yourself a copy, and you can make these on the regular.
Oh, so good the lights went out.
Now I'm gonna put on my avó's cute little apron and show you how to make the best vegan pastéis de nata. Oh, and pastel means one, pastéis means many, nata. I'm saying the Azorian pastéis. I feel like all the Azorian pronunciation is like shushing. So pastéis de nata instead of pastéis de nata. You can figure it out. First, you are getting out your blender to start the custard. And going in here, believe it or not, is medium firm tofu. And this was the wonder ingredient, the ingredient that finally got me to the texture that I was looking for these custard tarts. In our previous video, one of the recipes I made from those other creators used silken tofu and cashews to make the custard. I also tried firm tofu, but that wasn't quite right. And then when we created our vegan eggs Benedict recipe and I used medium tofu to replicate eggs, I wondered how it would work in these, and it turned out to be the winner. Also going in the blender is coconut milk, and this is full-fat canned coconut milk. I tried using soy milk or oat milk to make this custard, but it really needs the richness and the fullness in taste and body that full-fat coconut milk provides. To a blender, add 200 grams medium firm tofu with half a cup full-fat coconut milk, 1 teaspoon lemon juice, an 1/8 teaspoon ground turmeric for color, and a 1/4 cup maple syrup or sweetener of your choice. Blend until smooth and set aside. Next, I need to thicken this mixture so it becomes a custard, and traditionally the custard is thickened with flour and eggs, so this mixture will become my egg replacer, and here's where the flour comes in. Mix 3 tablespoons all-purpose flour and 3 tablespoons cane sugar in a small pot. Add a 1/4 cup full-fat coconut milk and whisk into a smooth paste. Heat over medium-low, whisking constantly until steam rises and the mixture starts to thicken. Slowly add the tofu mixture a little at a time, whisking constantly to avoid any clumps. Cook the mixture for 5 to 8 minutes, scraping along the sides and bottom as you stir so the custard doesn't clump. Once it has a pudding-like consistency, the shape of your whisk should remain in the custard. Remove from the heat and stir in half a teaspoon pure vanilla extract. Place a sheet of parchment paper on top so the custard doesn't form a skin. And now for the pastry. I'm using 1 square of Tender Flake puff pastry. This is a really popular brand in Canada that happens to use oil instead of butter, so it is accidentally vegan. You can, of course, if you are feeling really ambitious and wonderful, make your own vegan puff pastry, and you can make these natas even better. But in the interest of the timely part of Tasty Thrifty Timely, I've opted for store-bought pastry. And while I'm rolling out this pastry, I'm going to preheat my oven to 475 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 245 Celsius. And that is a little bit of a higher temperature than some other recipes call for, but natas are traditionally baked at a really high oven temperature. So I've chosen 475 to hopefully prevent your heat detectors in your home kitchen from triggering, but get them hot enough that they look as close to the traditional as possible. On a lightly floured surface, roll the pastry into a rectangle about 16 by 11 inches. Sprinkle 3/4 teaspoon ground cinnamon over the pastry and tightly roll the pastry up from the bottom into a long tube. Slice into 8 equal pieces. You'll notice that I'm only making 8 natas. I've tried making 10 or even 12, but I find by making 8, then it ensures there's enough pastry for the natas to be a good size and not too tiny. Oh, and now watch the next part for how to shape the pastry. Stand each of the 8 pieces on one of their ends and flatten with the palm of your hand. Roll each into rounds about 3 inches in diameter. Press each round into traditional nata tins or a muffin tin. Place a square of parchment paper over the pastry and fill with pie weights. Bake for 10 minutes. While those bake, let's chat. So I was able to buy these nata tins off Amazon, and traditionally natas are baked in tins like this that are more of a tart tin and have a more slanted side than a muffin tin that has a bit more of a straighter side. I've put a link in the description below in case you want to buy some of these for yourself and get a little bit closer to the traditional look. But you can of course make these in your muffin tin. That's what I did in our previous video when I tested those natas from the other 2 creators. But if you do want to buy these, I found that they've held up really well to the high heat that I'm baking these at. I've used them a number of times and they still look brand new, and I can use them for other desserts too. I also don't grease the inside of these tins. I've noticed that a lot of other recipes call for greasing them, but I've never had a problem with the natas coming out. There's a lot of butter in puff pastry, so you should be okay. Traditionally, the pastry is spread right in this tin using quick fingers and even pressure, but to get the most uniform shape for your natas, I've suggested using the rolling pin method, and that I have found is the best way to get tidy edges and an even pastry. But I'll keep working on this one and try to summon my ancestors. You should see the ladies who actually make them do it. They're just like talking about their day. Did you see Maria? Now, if you remember from our first nata video, I said that some of the natas kind of shrunk a little bit and they got a little squat. So adding the pie weights while the pastry bakes can help prevent that shrinking from happening much at all. Years ago, I did buy these ceramic pie weights. I didn't want to waste a bunch of dried beans every time I needed pie weights. It turns out, and I don't know if you know this, but I found out that you can reuse the beans that you use as pie weights. You're not going to be able to cook them and eat them anymore, but when your beans come out of the oven, just let them cool down and air out a bit, and then store them in a jar and keep these ones aside to use as pie weights. Okay, the pastry is coming out and the custard's going in. Remove the pastry from the oven and carefully remove the pie weights. Fill each pastry shell nearly to the top with custard. Return them to the oven and bake for another 10 minutes. You will likely have a bit of leftover custard, so if you want to use some other pastry to make a couple more natas, you can do that. You can also just enjoy this as a pudding because it's pretty tasty. And if you pick up a copy of our ebook, then I have a recipe for a tripa de aveiro, which is a sweet crepe from the Aveiro region in Portugal, and you need to put some sort of sweet filling in it. And this leftover custard works perfectly. After 10 minutes, remove the natas, switch the oven to broil on high, and use 3/4 teaspoon cane sugar to sprinkle on top of the custard. Put the natas under the broiler for 2 to 3 minutes, watching them carefully. You want the custard to start blackening, but you don't want the pastry to burn to a crisp. Action is starting to happen. Sugar is bubbling, so the custard is gonna look like it's bubbling up. And I found with some other tests, other ingredients that I used, the custard would like really bubble and boil over. With this version, I don't find that that happens. So it will start to boil and bubble, but it won't spill over. Remove and use a kitchen torch to further blacken spots on the custard to mimic the traditional look. Allow to cool for 15 to 20 minutes and then enjoy them while they're warm.
These look so good. Nata, cheers. Oh.
Oh, this is exactly the kind of texture of the custard that I was hoping for. It almost looks like it's gonna run, but it's firm enough that it holds. And we had some tests that were like, you could cut through it kind of like a brick. It was so firm. And then some that were like complete liquid.
I'm biased, but hands down, best vegan dessert I've ever had. Hands down. Ever.
Well, thank you, Sab. I'm glad you like them.
This is so good.
I'm pretty proud of these. They don't taste like tofu.
Nope.
And they don't taste like coconut.
Nope. It tastes like a custard. It looks like a custard. It tastes like a custard.
And blind baking the pastry with those weights is what got the pastry, even a store-bought pastry, quite a bit crispier than some of my other tests. Sometimes they were like
This is protein. I'm eating protein.
With a whole lot of butter. Vegan butter, so oil. The only thing I wish I could get more of naturally is the blackening, which really comes from the egg and probably the amount of sugar in the regular ones.
And the heat.
And the high heat of those like industrial ovens. I don't know what the monks did when they first invented this. You can look into the history of these.
Must have been some chubby monks. These are pretty...
They would fast and then they would indulge.
Gorge on these.
We only did one test where we actually got quite a bit of natural blackening. And I think that was when we tried using the product Just Egg. The top of them kind of looked great. It was like the best version I'd made. And then we bit into them and they were completely empty.
Poof.
I don't know where the custard went. It was just like a skin on top and then they were just empty.
Yeah.
So this is much better.
This is much better.
And what makes these even better is that you can freeze them. Like if you can eat them warm in the first half hour to an hour that you've made them, that's prime time. Afterwards, like these I made earlier today, they start getting a little more firm. The puff pastry loses a bit of its crispiness. But if you freeze them the first day you make them, then you can just reheat them in the oven at 450 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 minutes. And they crisp up again so nicely.
Oh.
And they're like perfect. So, for 8 natas, my cost is $5.55. Which is 70 cents
Something like that.
per nata.
Traditional ones can be $3, $4 per nata.
A lot of people like to put cinnamon on top of these and how we've been sprinkling some powdered sugar on top. I don't think traditionally cinnamon is added to the pastry, but a lot of people like to sprinkle cinnamon on top of them. So I've added cinnamon just a little bit to the pastry and it just gives it a bit of extra flavor. And usually we just put powdered sugar on top, but you can sprinkle some cinnamon if you like. If you have loved these vegan Portuguese custard tarts, then you can support us by hitting that subscribe button and liking and sharing this video. You can purchase a copy of our ebook with our 25 vegan Portuguese recipes, and that's linked below, of course. If you're curious what else is in that book, if you're not very familiar with Portuguese cuisine, then our next video is going to be a little book reveal, and we'll kind of have a spread. I'll make some of the recipes that are in the book and we'll give you an overview of what's in there. And there's a whole bunch of kind of little family anecdotes and Brian's beautiful photography of São Miguel, the island that my family's from.
We'll just hang out.
Yeah.
We'll eat some Portuguese food, vegan Portuguese food, and we'll hang out.